Welcome to this brief presentation about the Polish elections that are coming up later in October 2023, later this month. And they're very important because they are a brief microcosm of many of the important issues affecting the EU at the moment and many of the challenges facing the EU. And as you can see on screen there, the key issues and key terms that we'll be looking at in this presentation around cohesion and the development of the EU. So why are the elections in Poland important? Well, Poland's an important country in the EU because it's very populous, large market of 37 million people. It's got a very powerful army and an extremely fast-growing economy that's predicted to outstrip the UK's economy per head by 2030. It's a visibly affluent country, and many Polish people who left and went into other parts of the EU in particular, and Poland joined the EU, are now returning to the country to take advantage of the higher standard of living and the wealth that's offered there. And as well as its physical geopolitical importance, which we'll look at, it's also economically received 232 billion euros from the EU in cohesion funding since 2014. So the EU has invested a huge amount in this country, and therefore it's seen as a key element to the continued success of the EU. For us, it provides an interesting snapshot of issues around cohesion, obviously issues around enlargement as one of the more recent countries to join the EU. It poses questions about whether the EU should have a common military policy, you'll see, particularly in terms of some of the issues facing Poland, and also foreign policy. In this instance, the spectre of Ukraine casts a long shadow over this election. In terms of cohesion, the graph below, the further on the right to the graph you go, the more structural cohesion a country has, the more intertwined with the EU it is in terms of its economy, its infrastructure, its social policies. The higher up the graph you go, then what you've got there is evidence of individuals within those countries feeling themselves that they're part of the EU, feeling very, very European. So obviously what the EU would like is lots of people in that top quadrant, top right hand quadrant. Actually, if you look at Poland down towards the bottom of the graph in the center, you can see from 2007 to 2017, they're part of a group called the Visegrad 4, which is a group of 4 influential Central European EU economies. You can see that in that 10-year period, structural cohesion increased. It moved towards the right of the graph, that actually Poland became more and more adhered. There was greater coherence with the EU in terms of economic infrastructure, social policies. A lot of those cohesion policies looked at agricultural policies. But actually for the people within Poland, they feel a real disconnect from the EU. And of course, when it comes to national elections and people looking for issues, then some political parties you can see are tapping into that public sentiment, which is fairly anti-EU. Ironically, some of the older EU countries, you can see on there, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, although structurally may not have the same coherence as some of the newer Eastern European countries, that actually individuals there feel very much that they're part of the EU. So let's take a closer look at the election and the parties involved. This gentleman here is Jaroslaw Kaczynski. He's the leader of the Law and Justice Party. He's quite an interesting character. He's 74 years old. And he lives off the grid. He doesn't have a bank account and doesn't go online. And part of this, some people put down to the fact that he has a certain element as a reaction to his twin brother being killed in an air crash in 2010, along with around about 90 other members of the Law and Justice Party. His brother was the president of Poland at the time. And although there's no proof ever being found of this, his brother and many others blame the Kremlin for bringing the plane down. Jaroslaw himself has been deputy prime minister since 2015, but he is actually the person who, because he's in charge of the Law and Justice Party, the largest party, he's the guy who wields the most power in Poland. He's very right-wing. His party's right-wing and nationalistic. They're very pro-Poland. And as a result, their others, if you like, are that they are very anti-German for historical reasons. Germany both invaded Poland, and also because Germany has this dominance in the EU, they feel that Germany is once again looming as a spectre over the country. They feel a shadow cast from Russia, particularly since the Ukrainian conflict and Russia's imperialistic ambitions seeming to be growing. But also, they are very anti-Ukrainian. Again, we'll look at some of the historical reasons and current reasons why that would happen. On top of this, the electoral maths are important in Poland. The election is very, very tight. So the Law and Justice Party is seeking the support of a right-wing party called the Confederation Party, who are very pro-Russian, ironically. And although in this case, they may find the pro-Russian sentiment difficult, what they will find very easy is the anti-EU sentiment that's there. Very, very recently, the Polish government has, under the influence of Kaczynski, have stopped support for Ukraine. And those grievances are multiple, and we'll see what they are. But again, it's no accident this is happening with election time coming up. And the Law and Justice Party are causing concern for the EU because they are a party openly who want to discuss the prospect of Poland leaving the EU. On the other side is probably politically what you would describe as the polar opposite of Kaczynski and his views, and that's Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk leads the Civil Coalition. He's the former president of the European Council. He's very pro-Western and pro-EU, as you would imagine. He's previously been the president of Poland also. He is currently subject to a big propaganda campaign where he's been characterized as a pro-German candidate because obviously his ties with the EU. There are even some accusations going around that he is German and not actually Polish, although that's not been proved anywhere really, and that he's also pro-Ukrainian, which in most of Europe seems to be a given at the moment, but in Poland could be a problem. In a more sinister way, Kaczynski has accused him of being part of the Kremlin plot against his brother in 2010. And what was most damaging is that the Law and Justice Party have leaked a map which has caused huge problems in Poland because they basically leaked a military map from 2011, which showed that in the event of a Russian invasion, the Polish military would fall back to a position where they would basically give over half of the country to Russians and fall back to a strategic river where they would fight from there. And that's been used by nationalistic elements in Poland to show that really he has no loyalty to the country, that he would be happy to give over land to the Kremlin. And of course, in his position as president of the EU Council, it's never been difficult to find photographs of Donald Tusk with Angela Merkel and German leaders and with Putin and Russian leaders. So these are the two main parties that are wrestling it out for the future of Poland. So here is where Poland is. You can see geopolitically it lies between Germany, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia to the east. So the main pressure here, in blue, I've tried to characterize some of the issues that will be more prescient for the Law Party. So what you've got here, the Law and Justice Party, so what you've got here is, first of all, they very much stoke up memories of the Volhynia massacre, where 100,000 Polish citizens were massacred by Ukrainian forces at the end of World War II, something that still is a big issue for many people in Poland. Poland has taken about 1.5 million refugees from Ukraine, a country that it's had a very difficult past with, and that's caused a huge amount of tension and division in the country. And what's happened is the EU, to try and support Ukrainian finances, have actually lowered many of the tariffs they have on Ukrainian grain. And as a result, cheap Ukrainian grain has flooded into the EU, which has helped the Ukrainian market, and the EU there dropping some of its protectionist tendencies. But as a result, that's undercut what is still one of Poland's largest inputs into the EU, which is their huge grain harvest. So there's a very easy enemy for the Law and Justice Party to find there in Ukraine, and as a result, they've cut off support for the Ukraine in recent months in an attempt to try and shore up that kind of vote ahead of the election. Of course, what the Civic Coalition will play on, and I've put their ideas in red, will be the EU support for Ukraine in their fight for justice and eventually, maybe Ukraine will start its journey to join the EU, which again will be another issue for Poland. The Law and Justice Party also are nervous about the threat of dominance from the West. They rail against EU dominance of Poland, and particularly German dominance of Poland, which is a historical issue again for many people in Poland. So you can see here, even in 2023, issues from the middle of the 20th century still loom large over many people's psyche in Poland. Of course, there's been phenomenal EU and investment and support into Poland at the same time. So in this case, for every yin, there's a yang. And of course, Poland has access to the world's largest internal market, being through a member of the EU. So the Civic Coalition does find it easy, particularly for younger people in Poland, in particular for the more wealthier urban populations, to sell this kind of pro-Western approach as being the way forward for the country. One of the worries is that global media watchers even picked up on this point, that the Law and Justice Party is developing an increasingly authoritarian role in the media, with even accusations of electoral tampering, which again are raising issues within the EU, who have standards for these sort of things, but also it plays very much into the hands of the Law and Justice Party if that were to be the case. Of course, the Law and Justice Party also still conversely talk about a threat of invasion from the Kremlin, which they ironically sell to the Polish people as often being historically well supported by the EU, and they peddle a narrative that the current situation in Poland is pretty much as a result of years of neglect by the EU. Finally, there's another issue to throw into the mix, which is that there are some elections taking place in Moldova, which we think may not be of importance, but Moldova also is interesting. Moldova is a candidate country for the EU, bordering on southern Ukraine, where Russian forces are still dominant. And actually, Robert Fico, who's trying to be re-elected in Moldova, is trying to be re-elected on an openly pro-Kremlin ticket. Many people believing that Moldova would be the next logical choice for Russia's imperialistic ideals, if you like, if they were to have been successful in Ukraine. And already there's accusations that Russian forces are covertly operating in Moldova. So Moldova, on one hand, has themselves down as a current candidate to join the EU, but at the same time, they're looking to maybe elect a pro-Ukraine, pro-Kremlin candidate, So within that, there could be a microcosm of what might be about to happen in Poland. So the Polish elections neatly summarise many of the issues facing the EU, and will be definitely worth keeping an eye on later this month. Okay, thank you very much.